All right, folks, welcome to Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I'm your host, Rich Barris, the People's Pundit. Don't forget to like the videos if you like them and share them far and wide. All right, I have something I'm going to start the show off with, of course, here. But this is a very requested interview. Locals, this is for you, of course. We were going to try to do this next week, but it all came together and we can make it work today. I will still try to save some time for questions for Q&A. But you know, we'll see how it goes, of course, right? Laura will get kind of mad if we don't. All right, look, I want to open the show though before we do this interview. I want to open the show and I go over something with a little story. And it's a story maybe some of you may have heard me tell, okay? If you've been with me a long time. And I, know that some of you guys have been here since we were, the only pollster to accurately poll the national and the battleground states in 2016. And it's been a very rough ride ever since. But in that time, I think without a doubt, it's not really in dispute that there is no other pollster who has interviewed more Trump voters. And I don't mean just MAGA, because MAGA has evolved. Let's just call them Trump voters for now. And we've defined MAGA in many different ways. But I don't think there's anybody who's interviewed more of them than me. And then over the years, how this coalition that has supported Donald Trump has evolved has been complicated, I think is a fair word to use. And also a little bit surprising. And I don't think we've learned enough about that, or at least it's not reflected in the language and how we speak about the MAGA coalition, the Trump coalition, which is his coalition and not the coalition of the Republican Party. There is one thing, and before I get into the story, there is one thing that I think the people who are, or I would say like the anti-MAGA forces, the anti-America First forces, I think that's a fair way to put it. There is one thing that they are doing this time better than they did after he won the election in 2016 and subsequently, of course, became the president in 2017. And that is co-opt the movement and have people who are, however you want to put it, folks, pick your phraseology, wolves in sheep's clothing, right? Complete frauds, cons, however you want to put it, guys. It's up to you. They tried that in 16 and 17 and 18, but they couldn't help themselves from pulling their own masks off, and they exposed themselves very early. And then we know that led into primary challenges, 2022, which is getting into what we're talking about here, Winston going nuts, but getting into what we're talking about here, what this article that I'm going to read is so important. But there was this massive primary battle between the forces of the president and America First and the establishment who tried and pretended to be supporters of the president, all the while formulating a plan to attempt to stab him in the back and prevent him from winning the 2024 Republican nomination. That included sabotage in the midterm elections in 22. They lost a bunch of seats that they otherwise absolutely should have won. But they figured that with moderates, they would win seats in places like Rhode Island, New York, Connecticut, and elsewhere that isn't particularly MAGA, that they could do so sacrificing people like J.R. Majewski and John Gibbs, right, and many others. And they just let these guys go down. Michael Cassidy, who beat Michael Guest in the primary in Mississippi 3. They wound up throwing, a tiny little district, millions of dollars at this guy. And now Michael Guest is one of the most fervent never-Trumpers in the U.S. Congress. Again, I'm getting a bit ahead of the storyline here, but I want to rewind the tape to 2017 when Donald Trump was getting ready to be inaugurated. And he met with the Republican conference in DC, and one of the places where they all got together to powwow, which is a common place they all do, is at the Mayflower Hotel. And while Donald Trump was in there, you could hear everybody pulling their little acts and routines. If you're a voter, you heard something very similar out of Paul Ryan, for instance, when he went to the microphone and he said, "I was wrong. Donald Trump heard a voice that nobody else heard. Well, I hear you now. It was a con. It was an act." And he went on, of course, to stab all of you in the back if you're Trump voters. And he went on to then, wreck a large part of the Republican Party with him. Is a big shot with the Murdochs and Fox News. But He and McConnell were overheard, and by overheard, I mean I told everybody what they said, and then it spread. They were overheard saying that this was hilarious, that Donald Trump was a joke, he was a clown. This idea that he's going to give the country a wall is laughable. Mitch McConnell point blank said, don't worry, we are not restricted like you are in the House. You have more people there. You know, it's more subjected to the whims of the voters. You're up for election every 2 years, that kind of thing. But in the Senate, we pump the brakes. We're the deliberative body. And there's no way in hell this Senate is going to give Donald Trump a wall or a ton of other things that he had promised the voters. All right, so when you fast forward before the midterms, we had this big omnibus bill, and McConnell did, in fact, make good on that promise with the help of people in the House. By that time, it was Kevin McCarthy, who Trump thought he could trust, who basically told Donald Trump, don't worry, we know that the Senate is talking tough, but we'll get it done when we get back from this break. Right now, the most important thing is making sure that we don't lose the House, right? We're going to have a fantastic House, Mr. President. You know, we're going to have a fantastic election cycle, Mr. President. Don't worry about what all these critics are saying. And we're going to, you know, with your help by doing stupid stuff like endorsing John, Cox out in California, that will help us keep the House, et cetera, et cetera. And that did not happen. But there's a reason it didn't. I mean, it was never true to begin with. They were always going to stymie him. And some things that I think that the voter at home does not understand when we talk about MAGA and its fight against the deep state, the administrative state, the bureaucracy, the blob, whatever you want to call it, you know, the powers that be, the ruling class. What I don't think most people have let sink into their brains yet is that the Senate is the swamp. It doesn't matter if it's a Republican majority. If you think that the Republican conference in the House is filled with a bunch of lying, two-faced scumbags, and they are, you have seen nothing when it comes to the U.S. Senate. The Senate is the swampier of the two chambers, and it has long been the biggest obstacle for MAGA and Donald Trump to get their agenda through. And for years, these people would be able to, distract and co-opt and say, oh, that's not true. Look at how many judges we got onto the federal bench. Well, those were McConnell Federalist Society judges. The Federalist Society, of course, is not MAGA. It's not even conservative. As long as these judges believe that big business can do whatever they want to screw the little guy, that in their mind is what constitutes as being conservative, right? So they put a bunch of judges on the federal court that really are not great, and they have failed MAGA over and over and over and over. So with that being said, I wanted to use that basically as a preface to this article that I'm going to read, because the race for the U.S. Senate nomination on the Republican side in South Carolina is a big deal. It is ground zero for whether or not MAGA will survive after Donald Trump is gone, or Trump's legacy will survive when he is gone. And you can say whatever you want. Donald Trump endorsed Lindsey Graham, blah, blah, blah. Well, right, of course, Donald Trump makes some bad endorsement decisions. We all know that. Donald Trump makes bad policy and personnel decisions. We all know that. This time he has been more successful at taking control of the government. But again, there's somebody I think that's pretty important that we should be acknowledging is responsible for that. And folks, it isn't Lindsey Graham. When Lindsey Graham, when it got tough, Lindsey Graham did what Lindsey Graham always does, which is cave to the left, and he did nothing to protect Donald Trump's legacy. And in fact, told donors things like, we all know Joe Biden stole the election, but there's nothing we can do about it. Let's just move on. This was how Lindsey Graham reacted to the 2020 election, right? So Trump is very easily won over by flattery and other things. But the fact of the matter is, we have a bit of a preview of what will happen to Trump's legacy if the Republican voter does not change the makeup of the United States Senate. How do we know? Because we have already seen it. After the 2020 election, they proceeded to dismantle everything that Donald Trump had done. Joe Biden, and really when I say Joe Biden, of course, I mean the 20-something-year-old progressives and Ron Klain, who were in charge for a long time, because, of course, Joe Biden was senile and crapping his pants every day, and he wasn't doing anything. They had to do everything like the anti-Trump, the un-Trump, right? They had to un-Trumpify everything, and they had to take actions that would be the antithesis or the opposite of what Trump would do. And it led to horrible disasters, a huge cost of living crisis. It led to, by the way, we just had the anniversary this week of servicemen and women needlessly being killed in the botched withdrawal from Afghanistan. And now an army that we fought, a government, whatever you want to call it, a nation state actor now, that we fought with the longest war in our history, which Lindsey Graham supported going forever, now has more sophisticated weaponry than they ever could have imagined. All right. These things have consequences. That is my point. All right. And we know who would and would not stand to defend what Trump has done this time and advance the MAGA movement. We know that because we know how they acted in the prior 4 years under Joe Biden. So it was, as I'm getting ready for this episode, all right, in this interview, I come across this article. And to me, the article was significant, not only because he really does lay out this argument better than I could, and that's why I'm just going to read it, but also because who of it is. And for those of you who don't know, James Bacon is a bright young guy, okay? And he has had a lot of influence with the president throughout especially during the midterms, right? Everybody wanted to speak to James because really to dumb it down simply, guys, what he did and a few others did was basically try to find candidates who were really MAGA, right? To separate the fake from the legit. And then, that eventually would lead to endorsements from the man himself, which wins primaries in the Republican primary. In this case, by the way, Lindsey Graham is not winning with that endorsement, which is why the president's people did not release that Senate poll. All right, just so you guys understand, the Nancy Mace poll, you saw the governor's race, you saw every race in South Carolina going on except the results of their Senate poll. Because, of course, if it was good and the president went out there and said, congratulations, Lindsey, you got such great numbers. If 40% is a great number for a sitting incumbent U.S. senator who has the endorsement of the most popular Republican president in our lifetime, if that's good, then I don't know what bad is, because an incumbent of his stature with his money and with the president's endorsement should not be sitting at 40%. And the reason they didn't release that poll is because he's got somebody on his heels. And this is a disaster, guys, for any incumbent of his stature. Let me read this, though, because, again, I really could not say it as good as James Bacon says it. And he has the MAGA bona fides to back it up here. The Project 2025 Senate candidate who could unseat Lindsey Graham. And I even think the title is a big deal, because this is how elections, especially primary challenges, work, folks. You really just got to get people to believe it could happen. Some of that definitely includes the donor class and the grassroots, obviously. But you just got to get the population to believe it can happen. And the next thing you know, the guy's cooked. That's how these things work. All right. Ask Eric Cantor. Moving on. In our current political environment, opportunities to oust incumbents are rare. Opportunities to oust the most notorious incumbents are virtually non-existent. But once in a while, political circumstances present an opportunity to dispense with the old and bring in the new. In South Carolina, that moment has finally arrived. There is no senator more emblematic of the old order than Senator Lindsey Graham. The protege of John McCain, Graham was the most vicious never-Trumper of 2016. When Trump was taking on the entire Washington establishment, Graham was a fixture on CNN attacking him. After Trump won, Graham said Russia hacked the election. It wasn't until McCain died that Graham switched his strategy from opposing everything Trump did to trying to win Trump over to his side with flattery, which, by the way, again, is something everybody knows is the way to Trump's heart. Where you stand in pivotal moments matters. When the game was on the line, Graham stood with Jeb Bush, Mitt Romney, and the New York Times editorial board. But Graham's abysmal record goes back well before 2016. He has a long history of caving to the Democrats on amnesty, gun control, climate change, and bank bailouts. The only thing he stood up for consistently over the years is needless war, starting with Iraq. Today, Graham is the most vehement war hawk in Congress. Fair statement. Timeout. Fair statement. 100%. He voted to send hundreds of billions of tax dollars to Ukraine, support a regime change war in Iran, and is currently pushing for even more sanctions on Russia. Despite his unpopularity, Graham has never been seriously challenged in an election until now. And before I get into this, I have to say there's a reason for that. Without getting too much into the specifics, I don't want to embarrass anyone. There was once a primary challenger to Lindsey Graham who was a serious primary challenger. They destroyed this guy's life. And it led to Graham allegedly forcing state attorney general to try to investigate them. This guy plays hardball. All right. This is like, again, I don't want to throw anybody's personal business out there. These things probably should be more public, guys. Honestly, they should be. But I'm very close to a pollster friend of mine who's from the state. Use your imagination. And the horror stories about Lindsey Graham is, it's not, he survives by fear. And he can get all of the money he wants from the military industrial complex. But he also has a lot of state strings that he can pull. And he seeks to hurt people who challenge him. Not because he thinks he's got the right ideas, folks. Obviously, if he did, he would go out there and argue them, right? And he would defend his record. He rules by fear and he survives by fear. That's a scary thing for the United States of America. All right. The architect of Project, until now, the architect of Project 2025 is taking on Graham with the fire and fury necessary to defeat him. Paul Dans announced his candidacy for South Carolina's seat early this month, calling Graham, and this was the headline of the night, calling Graham a childless warmonger with no stake in our country's future. That was by far the line that got the biggest round of applause. And that is the line that you saw all over local media if you lived in South Carolina. Dan's candidacy is exciting because he has the political credibility necessary to take on Graham. And this is the problem with like Lynch, for instance. It's a joke. I'm sorry, man. I'm sure you're a very nice guy. You don't have the political, what Bacon is rightly pointing out is the political credibility to run against him. You don't have a story. Like, why would people vote for you over Lindsey Graham and Graham has the Trump endorsement? You don't have that story. And when Paul Dans gets on in a bit, we're going to bring him in a bit. That's what we're going to focus on here. Like, he has what I have always echoed to you guys is a justification. You need a justification to run. Like, why am I the person at this moment to take on that candidate or take on this race or that the problems of our day, right? What is it about me, right? And Paul has that. Lynch doesn't. All Lynch had for a bit there is that I'm not Lindsey Graham. And I know there is a ton of the primary vote electorate that doesn't want to vote for Lindsey Graham. So that's all there is to it. I mean, that's just not good enough. Graham is going to bury you. He's going to bury you. An original Trump supporter in 2016, Dans has been consistent where Graham has been vacillating. While Dans was putting forth bold proposals as the director of Project 2025, Graham was busy wasting more tax dollars on foreign wars. Dans made his bones in the Trump movement when John McEntee put him in charge of overseeing the career government workforce during the first Trump term. Dans took to the task with energy, taking over federal agencies for the president and restoring White House authority over the career bureaucrats. Dans was effective because he combined his legal acumen with obsessive passion for Trump's original agenda. All right, time out before we get into the when Trump's first term ended. I do just want to point out that Paul Dans is a really smart guy. And for those of you who obviously didn't know or haven't caught on, of course I do know Paul Dans. He's a very smart guy. He's a brilliant lawyer. He has great political instincts. Like, he understands people, probably because of his own life experiences. But also, I feel like, how could I put this? His mind works towards solving these kinds of problems. I mean, if you look at the the RICO case when he that's just, and I'll ask him to tell you guys that story about his early career in law. He's just got an out of the box way of approaching things, and that's why Project 2025 was able to be the blueprint that it has been. Unfortunately, which actually I'll shut up because Bacon's going to bring it up here in a second. So let me just keep going. All right. When Trump's first term ended, Danz began planning for Trump's comeback by creating the most ambitious plan to upend the government ever conceived, Project 2025. While Project 2025 was influential, the Trump administration ultimately turned to technologists to implement government reform, something, by the way, Paul Danz praised, and, he speaks very highly of them. However, they did not get the job done, folks. They did, because there's something they lacked that 25 did not. Elon Musk's Doge team tried to execute cuts, but were handicapped by their lack of planning and ignorance of the landscape. Ultimately, which body really became the problem for Doge, ladies and gentlemen? I mean, if you understand the challenges that Doge had, the U.S. Senate, it did not have the support of the very anti-MAGA U.S. Senate. And by the way, that includes Lindsey Graham. Guy's got a good talk in public, but behind the scenes, this guy is as swampy as it gets. The swampy Senate is filled with people like Lindsey Graham, and until that changes, nothing's going to change. I think we're all just kidding ourselves, pretending like, well, you can elect this one guy and everything's going to miraculously change and be reformed. That's bull. That is fantasy. All right. And honestly, as Bacon puts it, it's naive. It really is. Anyway, Elon Musk's Doge team tried to execute the cuts, but they were handicapped by their lack of planning and their ignorance of the landscape, meaning DC and how it works, guys. Now, with the big, beautiful bill's failure to deliver Doge's proposals, it is clear we need a return to the Project 2025 approach to government. The spirit of Project 2025 lives on in the candidacy of Danz. We need new blood in the Senate, the most stagnant institution of the Trump era. While many senators have adopted the MAGA talking points out of expediency, their power base remains on the with the GOP of old. God, never has there been a truer statement. This is the first battle. This primary, he's saying, is the first battle for the future of the movement after Trump. If we let MAGA's legacy be defined by Graham, then the Trump 2016 revolution was in vain. The choice is clear: Project 2025 or permanent defeat. It's up to South Carolina. Guys, I am not big on hyperbole. I'm a flary guy, right? I got a lot of flair to me. I like to talk with my hands. And I like to use somewhat dramatic language once in a while to prove my point. But I do like to think I stop at the line of hyperbolic. And many people would say, yeah, that's crazy. That's hyperbolic. If that race, it's not that important. It is that important. If Paul Danz does not defeat Lindsey Graham will be a de facto successor to the McConnell wing of the United States Senate, of the Republican Party leadership in the United States Senate. In DC, seniority rules. They decide what agendas get forwarded, what agendas get stymied. They decide what legislation gets advanced through committee and beyond, and obviously onto the floor for a full vote. And they decide which legislation gets tabled and kicked to the side or thrown in the trash can. They decide appropriations. The Senate's power lies in its ability to regulate things like the economy. The House has the power of the purse and to tax, and basically the Senate has everything else, including to rubber stamp military actions, to wage secret wars. Lindsey Graham had his chance to defend Trump's legacy, and he and the rest of the Senate completely failed. It is a reality that the United States Senate, the Republican conference in the United States Senate, is filled with a bunch of, I don't want to use the T word, but I'm trying to speak for a certain population in this country, a large population of this country, who voted for Trump, but not the Republican agenda. They are the biggest obstacle to that agenda. The Republican Party in the Senate, Republicans like Lindsey Graham. All right. And that is something that the Republican voters must recognize, come to grips with, and vote accordingly. Otherwise, Bacon's not being hyperbolic. The movement is as good as over. Period. And after my quick little 30-second drink of water, we're going to talk to the man himself about that. All right, stay tuned. We'll have Paul Dans right after this 30 seconds. Don't forget, if you like the videos, to like them and share them far and wide. That had to be a very serious and somber segment ahead of this interview. All right. Again, links are all below, the public polling project and everything else. I won't give you the spiel until later and end the show. All right. We'll be back. 30 seconds, guys. Don't go anywhere. All right, we're back inside the numbers with the People's Pundit. Don't forget to like the videos if you like them. Man, it's already 2:30, so let's not waste any more of the man's time and let's bring him on. All right. Very requested interview since he did Barnes and Viva, which was great, and I watched it. I hope you guys did too. All right, Paul Dans, ladies and gentlemen. Paul, thanks so much for joining us. Welcome to Inside the Numbers.
Hey, Rich, great to be with you and everyone.
You know, the first question I always ask people here, it's this, because this is a thankless job. You know, the first question I always ask people when they're running for office, Paul, is like, you know, what made you decide to do this? Like, what's your motivating factor here? And then, you know, a little bit about, I'm told some stories. Lindsey Graham has a reputation, and that's why people don't run against him. It's not because they're afraid they can't beat him in a primary, Paul. It's like he has a reputation. So knowing all of that, and I know you did, you know, what made you guys decide? And always, it's a family decision when it comes to this stuff. And you're in the position I'm in. You're a father, you're a husband, right? And you have a career. So what ultimately made you make that, you know, take that step?
Well, the sign behind me says God, family, country. So that's what I'm about. And that's what made the decision, really. You know, there's no choice here. I've dedicated the last 12 years of my life really to saving this republic. We are the accidental inheritors of this great, you know, beneficence that, you know, 250 years of our forefathers, more than that, built this great republic, and it's on our shoulders now to pay it forward to the next generation. I am the architect of Project 2025. I worked, you know, with a long group of patriots, over 1,000 the last 3 years, to make sure that the next president was ready to roll. And boy, did President Trump ever do that. But, you know, the battle continues. And we know now, as you were saying, the choke point of progress is really the United States Senate. That is the deep state in relief. And Lindsey Graham is the chief swamp monster. We have to get rid of him. This is controlled opposition. This is why we have been running in place. And everything that I've prayed for, that our life's worked for, that I'm hoping my children, you know, can continue to realize is coming together at this moment. So,
you know, you brought up your kids. The older I get, the less appetite I have for war and conflict. And I think that's probably a natural thing. You have children as well. And you think about, you know, this peace process that's going on now with Russia. Lindsey Graham, after supporting the war for years, I mean, it started under Joe Biden. He was a cheerleader for it. He's fire up the printing press. Let's give Ukraine whatever they need. Let's pump Zelensky, you know, with whatever he says that he needs. We've gotten nowhere, obviously. And now Trump campaigned on ending this war, Paul. He did. In fact, the post on Truth Social says, when I'm president, I will end the war in 24 hours. I mean, that is what he said. And now Graham is pulling this about face after after he lobbied the president for more money and the administration basically said, look, we're not going that route, he's now pulled an about face on the voters of South Carolina that somehow he's for peace. Yet he is also pushing for these Russian sanctions, which cannot do well for the peace talks. So, I mean, I was wondering, like, if you could just lay out where, like, if you were in the United States Senate right now and the president was asking you, you know, same thing he's asking Lindsey Graham, what do you think we should do here? Or what do you think the Senate would support? What would be your answer? What would you tell him?
Well, look, Lindsey Graham is a piece of work, and that's putting it nicely. The guy, this was his war. He worked with John McCain to start the whole thing in 2014 with the maiden coup. And, you know, Donald Trump's appearance on the scene, he was the interloper that, you know, kind of put this thing on hold for 4 years. That's why Lindsey and the rest of the gang went so vociferously after him. Like, he is the reason our movement came into being. A career politician, leaves his state 32 years ago, dead set on globalist agenda items like maxing out World War III. And it's just so far apart from the people here at home. So, you know, the fact that he is now trying to even use the word peace when he's already upset the peace process at least 2 or 3 times, people in South Carolina see through it. Really, he was back home. People know probably in Pickens in 2023 and literally got booed for 6 minutes straight. People were turning their backs on him, standing up. This is what President Trump, you know, in the middle of the campaign season. So those boos are getting louder. The base here knows exactly what this guy's about. You know, if I were in the United States Senate, I'd be following President Trump's lead right now. I would be saying, look, we have to end this madness. This is just a grind. All you're doing is killing off Russians and Ukrainians. We're not getting anywhere on this. This war never should have happened, you know, had Donald Trump been president, but it did happen because Lindsey Graham was in the Senate. And, you know, he's running off with Blumenthal, one of the worst actors in the whole U.S. Senate, palling around in Kiev, as we used to call it. But, you know, anything that comes out of that guy's mouth, I basically do the opposite at this stage. And, you know, his long distance love affair with Zelensky and mollycoddling this dictator, the guy who's taken away elections, free speech, practice of religion. Why are we even there in the first place? You know, defending the eastern border of Ukraine. It makes no sense. It's simply a proxy war for, you know, Cold Warriors who never got the message. It has to just stop. And that's going to be the way it's going to stop, is getting people like Lindsey Graham completely out of the Senate.
Let me just really quick, because I wanted to play something that Lindsey Graham said, actually, which I saw you saw. But this is a different state, you know, than it was when Lindsey Graham was first elected. And a lot of people would think that South Carolina, you know, this is the state that, for folks who don't know the history, this is the state that turned it around for George W. Bush when he was running for the nomination. McCain said it was his turn. McCain obviously did better in New Hampshire than expected, but then they made that pivot to South Carolina. Big military, right? The ex-governor there was key. By the way, Lindsey Graham backstabbed that ex-governor, and he was investigated for something he didn't do, and it basically ruined his second tenure. A guy who brought the economy to South Carolina, by the way. He passed away, I believe, in his 60s, right? No doubt because of that, some of that stress. It was a horrible time for him. But in any event, this is not the same state it was when Lindsey Graham and I'm not saying the military isn't a big part of the culture there. It's just that we have had seen the state change, state-to-state migration. I mean, is it this war hawk state that Lindsey Graham represents it as? And when you're walking around, is that what you hear?
Well, look, the people didn't change. We are patriots through and through. I'd say this state has more patriots per square mile than really any of them. You go back to the colonies, you know, this is the land of Francis Marion, the Swamp Fox, you know, all the way to General Sumter, you know, all these great Revolutionary War heroes to date, and you go through every major war. So look, they're first to fight and they're very proud. But when you are asked to fight 3 endless wars where you can't put your finger on any American real interest other than corporate and big money dollars and just kind of globalist architecture. People are getting enough of it. So look, I'm surrounded by veterans. Veterans are going to be one of the key constituencies for us. And I come from a family of war fighters. You know, the guys, I call myself a pure-blooded deplorable because these my you know, my family were the blue collar guys, you know, who worked in the factories, the tool and die makers, the textile workers. They went and showed up the first morning at the recruiting station for World War II. They went off and were heroes, really, you know, dropping behind enemy lines on D-Day. My grandfather was a merchant marine on the Murmansk run. I mean, as a, you know, these guys didn't even get veteran status until 1989, most perilous mission. So look, those were the quiet heroes, and they're all over the state, but they've had enough. You know, if they're the ones who are offering to lay down their life in defense of this country, it better be in defense of this country. They, you know, they're willing to die, but it's a cause worth fighting for. So Lindsey, you know, he never got the message. This guy's been promoting cheerleading every endless war, and you know, it's robbed our future generations of their inheritance. Really, you know, with 37 trillion, no one can afford anything anymore. Just he doesn't go to the grocery store, but the rest of us do. Look, the next generation can't even buy a house until 38. That's the average age of a starter house. How are you ever going to have a piece of the rock and believe that this is your country when you can't even own anything? You're just trying to make the monthly nut. And that's what this has done. They realized, you know, they could never sell these endless wars if they simply said, okay, who wants to chip in for gallivanting around Afghanistan and trying to do nation building, you know, in this area. It's going to cost about $3 trillion. We're just going to raise people's taxes. Well, that's not how they did it. They did it by surreptitiously printing money, the printing press. They inflate everyone's assets, and the people who own the assets, the top, all that cream rises to the top, but the working men and women, the people on fixed income, they have their buying power dissipated. And that's how these wars have been funded. And that's where the debt plays. So, you know, Lindsey Graham, his time's up. He went to Washington 32 years ago. The national debt was at 7 trillion. Fast forward now, you know, he's looking for his 5th term in the United States Senate. National debt's at 37 trillion and counting. And he chair-led not 1, not 2, but 3 endless wars.
What do you think he'll do with that term, Paul? Let's say, you know, Lindsey Graham didn't have a primary challenge and he got reelected. There's 2 years of Trump's term left. We don't know what's going to happen after that. Everyone at this point obviously thinks J.D. Vance will be a successor. That's a long time in politics to game something like that out. What we do know for sure, and what we can say for sure, is that Lindsey Graham would have 4 years after Donald Trump in the United States Senate. Is there anything in this man's history to suggest that he would do everything in his power to preserve or advance Trump's legacy in the MAGA agenda? I mean, is that not the number one question that voters are asking themselves?
Look, I wouldn't even wait till the 4 years after Trump. I'd wait till like right after the election. The guy would be already at cross purposes with Trump. We know him. Like, look, how many times can you get double dealt by someone where you say enough's enough? And even the Democrats, I mean, this guy has double crossed them one too many times. You know, he's already putting in motion the sanctions play. They basically, when he was, you know, in the Senate, when Trump was during hiatus here the last 4 years, he was Joe Biden's guy. You know, not only did he usher all those judges, the Biden picks, onto the bench, but he was doing the Trump proofing with the rest of them and putting forward these various commitments that expired conveniently in 2029. So, you know, the president goes against that. Lindsey Graham's going to be the first bipartisan voice for impeachment. And that's, you know, he is dead set on starting a kinetic World War III. There's no question about it. This is a guy who just has almost a, you know, the attention, his attraction to violence is almost pathological. You know, he says, you know, you should have shot more protesters on J6.
Yeah.
He's a guy who basically, I was talking to a constituent last night. She said he was on a prayer meeting with pastors and they asked him last year what he wanted to do with Gaza. And he said, I think we should nuke them, turn it into a parking lot. So
Yeah.
like, this is a bloodthirsty person. I, I walk around my state here. I'm yet to find the warmonger. I do not know where this constituency comes from. And the answer is it's his Washington. The guy checked out, lives in a mansion in Washington, and is rubbing shoulders with the military industrial complex. And the folks back home here, particularly the veterans who've answered the call, who are, the best among us, are like, no mas, this is over. So we're really looking for their support.
Yeah, and I was just going to go to that next. But who is supporting who in the state of South Carolina? And almost a part of me wishes Lindsey Graham was on the ballot when Donald Trump was on the ballot last election, because we would have saw this. We would have saw certain traditional constituency that just goes there and votes Republican every cycle because that's who's on the ballot, and they're not going to vote for a Democrat. But Trump did something in South Carolina that this last election that, I've been trying to, beat a dead horse, Paul, because I don't want candidates like you and others to forget it. And I feel like Lindsey Graham, with somebody like Lindsey Graham, they have no prayer of getting any kind of representation. These increases in vote margins in Black Belt counties, right? And other non-traditional Republican voting groups all over the state that did vote for something different, right? So, is it something you're trying to do with your campaign? Reach out to these voters, speak to these voters? I mean, at some point, the Republican Party's got to change, got to evolve, it's got to listen. And it's been resisting listening under Donald Trump since he walked down the escalator. And it's like, at some point, they're going to run out of time, right?
Well, what I did on Project 2025 was, I was a core loyalist, right? We got in, a shortcut my story, but I'm a guy just like the listeners here, always frustrated with politics. I can't vote for John McCain. I have to hold my nose and vote for Romney. How can this be? And finally, Donald Trump appears on the scene. I was a fan of his, like, going back decades, and I'm like, this is it. This is our chance. So, he's the guy who gets out there in South Carolina and like goes right at it and says, Bush lied, people died, right? He basically all of a sudden went there, and we're like, that whole thing, that whole premise of rolling into Iraq was a false one, and they sold it to us, and they knew it. So look, here's a guy who's already at the get-go basically saying, this is a different game. I'm going to be straight with you. And you have Lindsey on the exact opposite side, the worst antagonist to Trump. I get in there and realize, that half of we've met the enemy, and it is us. It's the Republican staffers that Trump put in there who actually hate him, but they're happy to get their Washington job, and they're actually working against him. So me and a group of core people got together after 2020, and I was down there in the trenches. Believe me, I saw what happened in Georgia. I am a rigged and stolen guy. That's a whole nother show. But I fought for the president. I got him elected at 16. I was in the war room in Pennsylvania. I was down there in Georgia in the aftermath of that, when we got run over, and that was our own inside job. That was a problem with people on our side.
That's right.
And then, so we went to work constructively building Project 2025. And we said, we have to get a foothold, even in the establishment world, and kind of claim this hill for Trump. And that's what we did. We went over to Heritage. Heritage made its auspices, its foundation available. And really, we built this movement of 110 plus organizations coming together. And my message was, look, we're not going to agree on everything. We agree on 70% of it. Let's focus on that. Let's get constructive with our anger, our energy, and make sure the next president's ready to roll day one. So we built these pre-built modules that could just be plugged in place the second a president took power. And that's what Project 2025 is. So yeah, my campaign is going to be exactly that. We're going to be reaching out to probably non-traditional constituencies, but really telling the base, the ones who have the heart, look, we are the cavalry. The cavalry has arrived. Now is the time. We're going to take this hill, and we're going to reclaim the state for the people. It's no longer a deep state Senate seat. It's going to be returned of, by, and for the people on June 9th, 2026. That's Liberation Day. I should tell all the listeners, please go to pauldans.com. That's our website. Support us, check us out. You can go over a little bit of my background, but look, this is not just a Carolina problem. Lindsey is. He is an America problem. and it's going to be on all of our shoulders to root this guy out. But the numbers, as you know, Rich, are catastrophic for Lindsey.
Yep.
Deeply unpopular. And I say that even with respect to the friends on the other side of the aisle. The Democrats hate him for equal and opposite reasons. And again, it's this double cross. He led them to believe he was on their side. Remember, he was the chief architect, or one of them, of the Russiagate conspiracy. Okay, this is the guy who told John McCain to give the P dossier to the FBI in the first place. And at the time he commented, I don't know, it could be true. I mean, think about that. He put the whole thing in motion. Mueller, Jack Smith, the whole thing that was centralized on delegitimizing the Trump term and basically tying his hands. And that's what they had Trump on his back heels for the first 2 years. And that was Lindsey. Every shot he got in 2017, he ran on and talked Russian interference, Russian interference. I want to cement this icy finding that the Russians interfered with the election. Yes, that's, by the way, the same icy finding that we, quote unquote, learned a month ago was concocted by Obama. So, Lindsey obviously knew that, not at the time it was concocted, and he certainly knew it when the Durham report was delivered. Why? Because he reads the classified annex. He has access to it. Why did he sit here for the last 3 years and go, wow, this whole, the classified annex, the Biden, the laptop from hell, all this stuff. He could have stood up at the time he read the annex, even though he knew it all along, and said, whoa, 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 whoa. This whole thing is a bunch of hooey, and he never did. So his lies are coming unraveled. I'm going to prosecute the case against him. And it's going to be very clear to the voters here in South Carolina that this guy's a snake.
Guy deserves an Academy Award for putting on this performance. I mean, as if he, like you just, voters at home should understand that he knew that was malarkey when he was saying it, Paul. He knew it.
I think, I think of the Kenny Rogers song, The Gambler. Better know when to walk away and know when to run. And when we say run, Lindsey, we're not talking about for a fifth term. Like, people know this guy's a scoundrel, and the stuff's about to come out.
Yeah, I would just say this too, folks. You got to remember, this is a guy who went on Fox News and told all the viewers, told you, told everybody on a daily basis, whenever Hannity and others would have him, Robert Mueller's a good guy. Let him do his job, knowing full well what was the pretext of that investigation. And oh, by the way, knowing full well that Robert Mueller and Andrew Weissman were not the kind of people you just sit back and let take the reins of an investigation like that and go to town over a fake crime that had no pretext.
100%. I mean, this is like the textbook example of justice delayed is justice denied, the whitewash in real time, where he took the Durham investigation. And remember, they legged that through not just the midterms in 2018, the election in 2020. Look, the Durham report's not out. Imagine if it come out and said that the entire thing was concocted and Trump was spied on. But they didn't even get it out until after 22 elections in 2023. And guess what Lindsey did? He was chairman of the Judiciary Committee. And do you think he ever launched a subpoena for those 2 years? No, he went and stonewalled, and he got up with his soapbox and said, I'm not going to interfere with an ongoing criminal investigation. But when it's done, I'm going to have some hard questions to ask of Mr. Mueller. I'm going to really ask, the whole lot of them, Clapper and Brennan and all these, people who should be in orange jumpsuits right now. I'm going to get to the bottom of it. And the whole time you see the smirk in the back of his mind saying, I ain't doing anything. I'm just going to keep hiding behind it. Look, you have a separate body of government. You have an equal and coordinate branch in the United States Senate. It is your job to do oversight. It's not interfering with an ongoing criminal investigation. And that thing's barely ongoing. Believe me, they're there just to make money and slow it down. And that's what they did to perfection.
And I know you think this as well. You know, I've talked about this before, but somewhere along the line, the Senate became, and the House does it too, but you just said it's their job to conduct oversight, especially of these very powerful intelligence agencies. And somewhere along the line, they stopped being their overseers, Paul, and they became their partners in crime. And that's a very dangerous thing in a so-called representative government, you know. But I do want to, because I've been watching you, and I do want to ask you about this. So Barnes and I talk a lot. It's just very motivating to voters. We talk about these four freedoms, and many of which over the course of the research that we've done together surprised me, right? You have food freedoms, financial freedoms, medical freedoms, and speech freedoms. And I've been watching you on financial freedom and crypto and all this. And they got two things for, I got two questions. One is, why does the government hate crypto and other alternative currency systems so much? And then I guess the second part is, what kind of benefit you think this could have to the economy if the government wasn't waging war on it?
Well, look, I think the whole battle of our time is really one of the individual versus the collectivism. This idea that, you know, a small group, a coterie of people can basically mete out the fates for the rest of us. And so everything from, like, you know, it's either you believe in liberty and freedom, and that's your continuum, or you're basically trying to get control over another person. And that's ultimately where we're headed. So you look in these various spheres, look, by nature, we're independent, but at the same time, we can be controlled. And the money is ultimately the beginning and the end, unfortunately. That's how they trade. The banks have been there for years. We don't need to get into political economy discussion today, but the way this thing has grown up has been part and parcel with the progressive era over the last 100 years, from Wilson forward, that with the advent of the Fed, basically taking the money supply. That what used to be, obviously, Williams, Jennings, Bryan, that was a political question, and that was taken from the people. But by design. And, you know, what crypto promises is the next generation. It's the same with the internet. There's this paradox where it can either be this great instrument of evolution where we continue to develop free, independent lives, or it can be a massive mechanism of control. Which way is it going to go? And with crypto, we're realizing that our data, everything about us, our privacy is probably the most important thing when it comes to another side that wants to control you. And certainly your financial data is paramount among that. They know your taste and preferences. They ultimately want to tell you your taste and preferences, but keeping what crypto promises to do. And obviously I'm an MIT grad and tech type guy, but I'm not going to, hold myself out as the architect of crypto. But my understanding really is it's part of this freedom. It's allowing you to essentially be your own bank and be the master of your own destiny. And look, Lindsey Graham is one of the top 5 enemies of crypto.
I was just going to bring that up.
The same people who do the Patriot Act are the same ones trying to crack down on crypto. He is hand in hand with Elizabeth Warren on this, with, basically they always trot out of these people are associated with their various crimes, and they're not. And no, they're actually not. They're kind of freedom loving individuals who want to get rid of this government. And guess what they have in common with? The very people who started this revolution 250 years ago, the same people who were trying to throw off tyranny, are probably now basically into crypto.
But without I guess without open minds in the Senate, it's going to hit an obstacle, because this is the purview of the Senate, folks. I mean, this is yet another issue that we have. It's the same thing with health freedoms on down the line. It really doesn't matter with the Senate being old guard. They're forever going to be stuck in their ways, Paul. There's not going to be any, there's not going to be any changing of the minds. Yet again, by the way, a big campaign promise.
I think it's really important life experience. Like, look, Lindsey's been working for the man the whole time, right? He was in the Air Force, and then he went to work for the state as a public defender, and then right into the U.S. government. So I don't think the guy's ever driven, maybe for a short term in private practice as a lawyer, but like never worked for himself, never really had to be an entrepreneur or businessman or, woman, and see what really became of it. And let alone, look, the guy never even committed to raising a family. He doesn't know what our kids go through. He doesn't know what it's like to be forced to be told your kid has to take 70 jabs and, at risk of losing her pediatrician if you don't comply. I can tell you as a dad how, coming home with my kid who took a shot that day and having to stay up all night with 105-degree fever,
Right.
put her in a bathtub with ice. It's like, for what? What are we protecting her from again? Of some like thing that maybe she had a blood transfusion in England from what are you talking about? It's a bizarre thing, but it's like big pharma, and there are people like just serving this stuff up. It's like, no, let's back up here. So I think, medical freedom is paramount. And I say that as a son of a world-class physician that, is actually, one of the casualties of COVID, not from COVID. He had Parkinson's, but it was part of this entire medical complex that basically shut that down. I saw my dad expire. I went in a moon suit in 2021 and got to visit my dad for an hour. And he was in, in some sort of lockdown for a week. It was the most god awful thing. But that sort of experience, praying for your father and being told, oh, you can join him on an iPad. I mean, this is the worst dehumanization. We just suffered through tyranny. And if we forget what we were going through, 2021, 22, debanking us, telling us you couldn't participate in civic life if you didn't have, papers, please. What they were doing to our kids, in schools. We finally saw that, but we have to deprogram our kids in public schools. I'm a guy who went K through 12 public schools. It helped me get into MIT. Now I have to tell my daughter, and she's quick about it, but no, we don't eat bugs. We're never going to eat the bugs. Okay, that is not a solution for humankind. But that's still, being piped out there. So I agree. All these freedoms are key, and I think that the four freedoms is a very helpful rubric to kind of center around.
What do you think and I know we're getting close around to let's leave it with this. What do you think? I know your expertise really was taking control of the government. When you're elected, getting control of that government, because an election of one man doesn't guarantee that the sovereign voter is going to be in charge of that government. And then, of course, legislatures, and they're all surrounded by this blob in DC. What do you think is more important? Can we walk and chew gum at the same time? Do we advance here and try to deliver on campaign promises, or, is accountability something that people should focus on more? Because it seems like at least the messaging is problematic, Paul. It's hard to get the Republican Party to be able to message both at once. And, what does the accountability even look like to these people, right?
I'm yet to see somebody frog marched out of their agency in an orange jumpsuit parade. Where is that? And,
right. That's accountability.
It's never any appetite for that when you get in power. They're saying, let's move on. Let's water over the dam.
Right.
So I like to say we could do both, but look, you got to remove those bad actors, and there has to be some sort of justice doled out here, meted out, because they're going to do it again and worse, so that's been frustrating to see. We're told, trust the plan right now, but look, that has to happen, and it will happen under my term in the United States Senate. I will make a pact to that. But look, I was the one, for people who don't know, I turned over OPM. I reclaimed this government agency for the president. It's because I had the courage to do it. I'm a lawyer. I'm a tech guy. And I just got in and I bulldozed my way through it because I didn't know any other way to do it. And that's what ultimately is happening. We set the way they should play in Project 2025, and they've come out of the gate. But now it has to keep going, and it's the U.S. Senate that's putting the brakes on it with people like Lindsey. So if you're behind us, go to our website, pauldans.com, chip in $20, whatever you can do, 50, 100. Look, sign up, push our message out on social media, get in the comments, because this is going to be an all of America effort to help us in South Carolina. We don't have his resources. He has 20 million, but we got to get up there.
Let me just say this real quick to everybody, folks. I can't think of another example of what Paul just said about getting control of that actual agency, that department, that bureau. I mean, others who went in, that was for the most part an utter disaster. Nobody else can say that they did go in and wrestle back control from the bureaucrats, from the blob, and give it back to the people or their sovereign representative, which in the executive branch is the president. He's the only extension of you. And if he can't grab control of that government, it means you don't have control of it. The actual permanent Washington class does. And as far as I know, Paul's the only one who was successful at doing that. Yeah, Paul, also tell people where they can find you on social media.
Yeah, we're at Dan's for Senate on X and Truth Social, as well as Instagram, I believe. So I'm also, my personal is Paul Dans USA, but follow us on the Dans for Senate. We're at pauldans.com again, sign up. We'll have people calling, come out, South Carolina, it's great to go door to door, and this is a beautiful state. But we really appreciate everyone's help around the, the country here. This is, we're going to do this. The numbers look great. And it's just really a matter of getting our message out there. So I'm grateful to you, Rich, and the Patriots listening here. And, keep the faith. That's what I would say.
Thanks as always, brother, for joining us. You're welcome back anytime. And, Charleston is gorgeous in the fall, so I'll probably see you soon. Also, again, folks, this is not just a South Carolina race. This is, I think Bacon, I'm sure you read Bacon's article, right? I think Bacon had this 100% correct. It is that serious. It's ground zero for whether or not MAGA continues, because the Senate is the biggest impediment to this, to that movement. And it's not even a question. All right. Without the Senate's compliance, folks, the administrative state would not be able to do what they can do. Thanks, Paul. Thanks for your time. And we'll see you soon. All the best.
Take care.
Paul Dans, ladies and gentlemen, go check it out. Go follow him on social media. Go check out his website. Again, I'm just going to reiterate what I just said, which is that this movement has got to start to think about this stuff as a president, just as important as a presidential election, because it is. Back in 2016, I remember telling people, why aren't you, why aren't you more excited for the voter? They got what they wanted this time. They finally got what they wanted. And I just remember turning to everybody and saying, the election of one man, a revolution doesn't make. It just seemed awfully naive to me to think that that would be enough, and that there wasn't an entire Congress of 450 men and women. The worst part is that it's like one side, at least you can respect them for being who they are and saying what they believe and fighting for what they believe. And then you had more than half of the other side that was just supposed to be allied with the man who just won the election. More than half of them being complete backstabbers, complete frauds, and complete traitors to their own voters. So at some point, the voters have to realize every election, I ask myself, what's going to be the question that's answered this election cycle? In 2016, the question was simple. Will Republicans basically declare their independence from Fox News and nominate their own candidate? Will they think for themselves and say, I'm not listening to this one on Fox News, to that one? There's no need to shame anybody, but we all know what we're talking about here. The Jeb Bush pushers. Then when Jeb was out, it was the Marco Rubio pushers. And then when Marco was out, it was the Ted Cruz pushers. They were just going through one layer of never Trump after the other. And the Republican voter held their ground. They held firm. They listened to not a single poll that came out that showed Trump was the weakest candidate, when, of course, he was always the strongest candidate. And they put their head down, they moved forward, and they did it. And they answered my question. In 2020, the question was, will Democrats be able to declare their independence from MSNBC and CNN? And you know what? Barack Obama, because everybody knew that in 2016, they in fact wanted Bernie Sanders, but he got screwed. In 2020, they screwed him again. Barack Obama himself played a huge role in making sure they did whatever they could to block Bernie Sanders' nomination. So the answer was crystal clear. Voters did answer my question in 2020 again, which was, will Democrats declare their independence from all of these influences, such, the party, the media. Do they have the strength, for lack of a better word? I'm not trying to insult Democrats here, but it's true. Do they have the strength, the independence to be able to do what Republicans did? And the answer was no, they did not. In 2024, I already knew the voters were going to do what they were going to do. It was not a hard election to poll. Everybody made it abundantly clear to every pollster who was polling that race ahead of time. We made a mistake in 20. We know what happened. Even those who did, vote against Trump and were persuadable, they also, had to contend with the other use of COVID to change our election and to handicap an election for a political party. So there was all that. There's that element of it too. But we already knew what they were going to do. And it wasn't a question. Will voters punish the ruling class for this con, this 4-year con that they pulled on the country? And they robbed them. They robbed them of their chance at change, not fake hope and change promised by Barack Obama, but real change. They robbed them. So I didn't really need the voter to answer that question because I knew they were going to. This year, in this midterm, the question is really simple. Do Republicans have another one in them? Do they have the strength to realize, this isn't all on Donald Trump? And I see so many people constantly on Twitter, it's Trump's fault with this, it's Trump's fault. Look, he's got his share of the blame, and I'm critical of him, more than the next guy. But the fact of the matter is, he can't do this alone. He needs allies. And the allies who flatter him and promise him the world do so out of fear. They don't do it in expediency. They don't do it because they're really friends with him or they really agree with what he agrees with, his vision. They don't. They're full of crap. They're politicians. It's what politicians do. They mold themselves. They're chameleons and they survive. Say what you will about a politician, but they're very good at surviving. And Republicans have to realize it's an act. They have to come to grips with the fact that it's an act, even when Donald Trump can't or won't, for whatever reason. This is Lindsey Graham real quick. I'm just going to put this video up. I want to show you guys this. And then afterwards, probably answer a few questions. But I want you to listen very closely to what Lindsey Graham is saying when he talks to these voters at this event. All right. And he's Mr. Charming. He's good, slimy little politician that he is. And he's very good at making jokes and misdirection because that's what he's doing. But listen to what he says about his relationship with Donald Trump.
I think I'm the only guy who got a t-shirt out of it all. But anyway, campaigns are campaigns. And when it was over, he called me and he said, "I'd like you to help me." And I said, "Sure." And Scott, you're speaking after me, right? Yes, sir. Just relax. I'll be quick. I don't know what they pay you, but it ain't enough. And you should get a Purple Heart. I'll be watching CNN and watch you. So anyway, President Trump and I had lunch, then we played golf. And I tried to beat him and I lost. He's a damn good golfer. He's a very good host. And people ask, what happened between the two of you? I said, we found common ground. I've come to like the president, and he likes him. So that pretty much is what we have in common. I think I'm
We found common ground. And he goes on to say in that, folks, that, people are basically friends with Donald Trump or want to make pals with Donald Trump so they can survive. Not because they agree with what he's doing, so they can survive. And they're basically afraid of what might happen if they're not. The last time Lindsey Graham was up for re-election, of course, was in 2020. The polls were actually very close. Had Donald Trump not been on the ballot that year and not lent his support as much as he did to Lindsey Graham, it might have been a different story. This will be the first cycle that Lindsey Graham has to stand on his own 2 feet. Democrats will put forward a solid fundraising candidate like they did last time. Because Democrats, despite all of the constant mocking from the right, aren't stupid. And they understand what Paul Dance just said is absolutely true, which is that he's a double-edged sword. There's actually almost like a Charlie Crist element forming in South Carolina when it comes to Lindsey Graham. You have part of the right that just can't stand him. That's why he's polling so badly. And they're like, God, Trump, like, you don't, why are you putting me in this position? Why didn't you just support somebody else? Are your judicial nominees and your cabinet nominees, did you really need to do this in order to get them through? I don't like this guy. He's not MAGA. It's not what I want. And then there's the other side, the Democratic side, which says, this is a guy who pretended to be on our side. He'll vote the way we want him to when we have our guy in. He won't make any trouble. He'll vote for an Eric Holder. He'll vote for a Lloyd Austin, a Secretary of Defense who did not believe in civilian control of the U.S. military. He'll vote for a Supreme Court justice who refuses to define the difference between a man and a woman. He'll lay down. He'll lay down for a Fauci-like dictate to stand 6 feet apart and to stay in your homes for 2 weeks, which turns into 2 years. He stands up for nothing except for foreign conflict. And he did nothing, again, to preserve Donald Trump's legacy. So he has both sides who hate him. The left doesn't like him enough for being a chump to vote for him. And the right doesn't like him at all. They only get bombarded with tens of millions of dollars from Boeing and elsewhere telling them you have to vote for Lindsey Graham. My point to you is I'm issuing a warning here to you guys, which is that the South is changing. And people like Lindsey Graham will not be able to win elections in states like South Carolina for very much longer. In fact, in a situation that is a catastrophic situation for Republicans, he could be in big trouble. He could end up in big trouble. And I will say this, and I'll say nothing else besides this. A majority of the voters of South Carolina, which includes both the right, the left, and the middle, don't think Lindsey Graham deserves to be reelected. It's going to take a lot of stumping from Donald Trump if he were to win the primary to motivate enough people on the right to ensure that there's not another embarrassment there. People are like, oh, you saying he's going to lose South Carolina? Maybe. Yeah, I am. I'm saying he definitely will in the near future because South Carolina is changing. And you will need somebody. Whoever asked that question, by the way, Laura, was a fantastic question. I have another question I promised I would answer. I'm got you up here. But that was a really good question. What will Paul Dans do to reach out to these constituencies? Because in states like Mississippi, by the way, we went over with the gubernatorial election in Mississippi, a great example of that as well, where Donald Trump does so much better than other Republicans in black belt counties. And since Republicans are no longer winning a 70-30 split of the white vote, as the white vote gets more educated and more liberal, you can't afford to underperform with these constituencies. And these constituencies are not looking for endless wars. They're not looking for Lindsey Grahams. So it's really like a countdown clock that's already ticking, and it's already a matter of time. So marinate on that. Peppers, this one's for you, and I just want to give you a perfect little shout out here, or my version of as perfect as I can get, which is that you've always been great. So I read the other part of your comment/question, and I just want you to know, do not worry at all. You have been wonderful. And, do you and take care of you. We love you over here. And we'll always answer your questions no matter what. All right. On a future show, will you address the disparities with the super low Dem approval rating and pathetic fundraising they are doing versus the GOP's numbers? And this is so relevant. I'm glad you asked this for this episode. I'm afraid that the Republican voters are going to blow it in the midterms by being overconfident again. The GOP has 4 times the money and a higher approval rating right now. That red wave in 22, and by the way, in 4, same thing, Peppers, ended up being a red trickle. Now, I know most of that was due to Lindsey Graham saying they would ban abortion, another winner, by the way. But anytime we have the numbers, the stupid party effing blows it. And you haven't really discussed the low Dem money numbers yet and what it means for us. Thanks, Rich. Thank you. And this is a great question. So about the money, first and foremost, this is something that's a little bit misleading. For years, I would say even starting with the Clinton campaign, really, the DNC, barely could keep the lights on. They weren't raising any money. The RNC still was more of a central hub, which is a little bit ironic considering Dems are supposed to be the centralized party, right? The party of centralization. Well, Republicans are supposed to be the independent party, right? Or the decentralization party. But Hillary Clinton took it over, basically raised the money herself and put it more into her entities. And it had already kind of been defunct. Debbie Wasserman Schultz ran it down, but they still raised money through entities like the DCCC. Those organizations, or I would say the DNC first, was supplanted by third-party groups. And those third-party groups, which Democrats claim to hate because of United, oh my goodness, Citizens United, that decision, all the dark money, of course, and the PAC money. They claim to hate it, but they ended up being extremely proficient and competent, not incompetent, and extremely competent in creating these groups and utilizing these groups to win elections in a way that gets around a lot of the caps and stuff that obviously you would get with traditional campaign fundraising and entity fundraising or committee raising like DNC and the DCCC. We had Act Blue and others that they did, right? So that's why Trump is smart to say that they should be investigated. They should, because they effectively launder money. But they have been doing this now lately as well with entities like the DCCC. So it's going to be a little bit misleading to look at some of their numbers and say, you know what, Republicans are outraising the hell out of Democrats. That may not be true until a lot of this, and this is unfortunate, you won't know until the dust settles. How much money did they raise in those third-party groups, and how did they go about getting creative to help out their candidates that they were meant to support, right? And so I think it's a little too early, and we don't have enough information yet to understand if Republicans really will have a money advantage. And I suspect they will not. I suspect that over the years, and I've been warning about this, Democrats are going to get more and more dark money. And because they're becoming the party of the rich, they're not becoming, they are the party of the rich, and they have to get around those caps. They no longer have bases like Trump has a base and other Republicans can cobble together these low dollar donations. They don't have that. They have big, rich billionaires who cut huge blank checks to them. And they need to go through third parties in order to funnel that money appropriately. So I've been concerned that that's going to get worse over time with Democrats. And I think we're honestly starting to see them apply this to more of what they did in 22 that was successful to congressional candidates and senatorial candidates. So yeah, I'm very worried about that stuff. And I think that that's probably causing a lot of the disparity with the money right now. And we simply don't know. All right. Remember, rich people have caps when they give to like directly to a party, right? Or they have caps when they give directly to a campaign. There's only so much they can give in each cycle. But if you're giving to a PAC, you're not even going to be, disclosed or doxed for it. You could write this big old fat check and that's it, Pep. So, it's the dirtier way to do it and the way to stick more money in it. I would even throw 24 into your description of what you were talking about. And this is why, if you're a Republican, you better be concerned about people like Lindsey Graham in the future, especially because now that Republicans are the party of the lower propensity voter. And by the way, I could have really jumped on the stream earlier this week and threw shade at all of my so-called critics on social media who are really just wannabes and are trying to deride me and get audiences by me constantly defending myself against their attacks. I'm not playing that game. They were very clearly wrong at this point, in case you missed Iowa and you missed Pennsylvania and you missed Florida and you're going to somehow miss Virginia and New Jersey. They are wrong. I am right. Republicans are over there bragging about surges in voter registration numbers and getting their asses kicked in special and off-cycle elections. Midterms will be better for them, but not much better. They need to get their act together. This is, again, Trump's coalition. And without people like Paul Dans being the face of the Republican Party in these legislatures, it's going to be hard to transpose Trump's coalition onto these other candidates because they simply don't trust the Lindsey Grahams of the world. They don't. Or candidates or the state Senate candidates. By the super majority is gone now. In one of the reddest Midwestern states, or Trump reddest Midwest states in the country. They didn't listen. And now look at them. The number one job should have been to recruit people like Paul Dans who speak like Trump's coalition, who speak to Trump's coalition, who understands their fears, who understands their needs, their dreams, their priorities. Not the same old, go along to get along nonsense, because here we are now. Congratulations. Bomb Iran again. Maybe that'll help. Let's see what else. Wow, there's a lot of I mean, at this point, I think it's just very clear. If you listen to those people, then you deserve to be led astray. I don't know what else to say, guys. Those people were wrong. I was right. How on earth? I mean, we did so many shows. How did Democrats defy history? Why did Republicans underperform? How could I have been right on the generic ballot, yet they still suck? I thought we've been through this already. I do think, and this is from Ryan on Locals. Ryan, I can't put your comment up, but I do think, what do I think of the RNC planning another national convention for next summer? I think that's a great idea, as long as the issues that they're going to advance and speak to are the correct issues. I mean, if they go up there and bring on Bibi Netanyahu to talk about how great we've done in the Middle East, you might as well just waste your money. Burn it. Go outside and burn it instead of giving it to them to put on that show. They're backstabbers. That's how they're seen right now. They need to get back to their message. They need to get back to the things that won them the election, and they will need Donald Trump to motivate these people. They will. They're not going to be able to do it. Do you guys remember that guy we interviewed in Nevada and Vegas in the 22 election, and then we re-interviewed him afterwards? He said he was going to vote for Adam Laxalt, but he in fact did not, because he didn't vote. But then he went and voted for Trump. When we polled Nevada, he said, yeah, I'm going to vote for Trump. And he did. That kind of guy, by the way, Hispanic. Not older, but middle age, but on the younger side, my age. Right? In his 40s, working guy. That's the guy they're going to need to get out, or they're going to lose. And they got to get Donald Trump directly involved to do that. A convention is a great start. But Trump is probably going to have to run around the entire country like he did in 2018 to make sure some of these Senate candidates are okay. He ignored some of the district races. It depends who these nominees are going to be down ballot. I mean, I'm telling you, for Donald Trump to go to South Carolina to ask the voters of South Carolina to vote for this stinker is going to hurt him in the end more than it's ever going to help him, even if Lindsey Graham is a win, of course. Like, oh, I helped Lindsey get across the finish line. Right. And now you look like a rhino. And now you just hurt JD Vance. And JD, don't you do it, man. I love Don't you do it. Think about the future. That's all I gotta say. You better tell your boy. You better tell your boy. I'm giving you bad advice. He's trying to sink you. I don't know. I guess the guy doesn't want a job with your 2028 staff or something, you know? Right. So there we have it. I mean, I don't know who these people are interviewing, you know? I mean, that's it. Anyway, I'm going to put the link to, it's on my Twitter feed, but I'm going to put Bacon's article in all of your chats right now. If you haven't checked it out, Locals, I actually went on Locals and said, hey, do me a favor, guys, read this before the show, because I think it was that good, that important, that spot on. And this is the thing with a candidacy like Paul Dance's candidacy against Lindsey Graham. I know. Trust me, believe me, I know. And so do their pollsters. All you got to do is make people believe it. That's it. It is hard to take out incumbents, but once in a while, those opportunities, like Bacon said, do come. And all you got to do is make people believe it. And of course, he needs support. Of course, he needs, present and financial support and active support and everything. I mean, that's, you have to. It's the unfortunate reality of campaigns. But once that catches on and people realize, oh my God, he can win. That's what they don't want. That's what they're hoping to depress you, so you never come to that conclusion. Because once it does catch fire, it takes off like a rocket ship, and there's no controlling it. Dave Pratt, he knows, he felt it. There are few people who have been around moments like that, and they know it. They know it, and they know what it feels like, and they know what it looks like. And then it's like a train has left the station, man. It's gone. No reverse. So that's what they need. And like you said, he's just got to get the message out. He does need to get, he has the right message for the election. He has the right justification for the election. People did not go through all of this just to see what small, what there haven't been big reforms yet. Let's get real. I mean, there has, but they could dissect the big, beautiful bill in a second if they were to get back in power. You think Lindsey Graham would step up and stop them? Sure. Okay. You'd be like, I'll tell you what. If you topple the Ayatollah, I'll vote for repealing all that shit. Topple the Ayatollah, please. Ugh, man. All right. So with that in mind, I guess I will take off. I hope you all have a great weekend. I got to go get my boy from school. It's that time. But yeah, just to thank Paul Dans again for coming by. He's been super busy. The guy's been all over the place. He's constantly campaigning and constantly running. I mean, he's a worker. He's a worker and a really super smart guy. I can tell, you guys probably can tell, like, very, very authentic. I don't know why good people subject themselves to this stuff, but thank God they do. That's all I'm saying. Right. Thank God they do. I could talk to Paul probably for a 2-hour show, and we could kick ideas like policy stuff around. Unfortunately, the format here, 30-minute conversation, awesome. But he's that kind of guy. That's one of the problems we have today, folks. It's just like all these people are just not big enough they are not big enough to meet the challenges of our time. They're not. And they're failing us. And again, the voters have got to come to that conclusion and soon, or else we're cooked. All right, guys, with that in mind, I'm going to go get the kid. All right, I hope you all have a great rest of your Friday. Don't forget, if you like the videos, to like them and share them far and wide. And of course, share the public polling project. It is August 29th. And I'm not going to put it up there. I don't want to show it again. Go check it out. It is like a little over half done, share it as much as you can as well. I really can't stress how important it is. If just pop it on your Facebook, pop it on this, pop it on that, because the more of a base we have, the easier of a burden it is on the same people who, are so generous and fund it every quarter. Let's try to build out who does that so it doesn't fall on them so much. We haven't had reverse inflation yet, have we? I don't think so. People still hurting out there. All right. Yeah. So that's it. I'm going to kick rocks. Thanks as always. Nothing but love for you. Special thanks to Paul again for dropping by. We'll have him back soon again, folks. All right. All the best. Deuces. Can't hear. That's a good point, Laura. You just brought up. It's a reality in politics that you do need financial support because it's like you got to minimize their narrative. I mean, that's really the name of the game. Yep, 100%. Good point. Enjoy your sunny Friday if you're by me. It is.